All right, what is up, everyone? Welcome to another edition of the Fandom Effect Podcast. As always, I am your host, the Bushido Geek, aka the Shogun of Fandom, joined as always by Sam the Man.
Hi.
And welcome to the new year. I guess it's the second episode of the new year, but welcome to the new year.
Yeah, if my calculations are correct, and they're usually not, it should be the second episode.
But probably not. So
We'll find out.
We'll find out whenever I remember to edit at 2 a.m. Not like that doesn't happen all the time.
Mm.
So, what have you been up to this last week, Sam?
Dying.
Exactly. We're both dying, so apologies in advance for a death episode. I'll change the title. It's going to be called Death Episode. But
Yeah, neither from each other. We
No.
don't look close enough for that.
No,
It's just
no.
coincidentally,
I
we're
haven't seen
both
you in a while.
just dying.
yeah, so welcome to the episode of coughing. But we got a special episode here today. This was Sam's first guest on her own.
Yeah.
So there's a little audio clap. I'll put in some clapping sounds. Like I'll throw in some audio clapping there for you.
Some canned laughter.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
But we are joined by Austin Huff, who has a pretty cool Kickstarter going on right now, which we're going to dive into. But you have a pretty interesting comic book story, because a lot of people they've been doing it for a long time, or they've had stuff in the works for a long time. You kind of just all of a sudden one day were just like, you know what? I'm just going to write a really successful comic book and get some really high profile names to do it with me. How did all of this come about? What made you one day just go you know what? I'm just going to write a comic book.
You know, it was it's just a crazy story, and it's every time I think of, okay, well, it began here, I realize, oh no, it began there, and then it goes so far back in time. I'm 52 years old, and by trade, I'm an insurance agent. Okay, and I've always been into comic books and toys, and I've collected toys from the 70s, particularly action figures from the 70s made by a company called Mega. Now, these are 8-inch action figures. They come with clothes. You remove the boots, guns, hats, whatever. And I started making my own custom action figures in the middle 1990s. And, it was the dawn of the internet. I found a bunch of other guys who were doing it, so I wanted to get involved, and I started doing it. And to date, I've probably made over about 650 different additional characters that go with the DC and Marvel superhero lines from this toy company.
Ooh.
And about around the same time, I was watching some old episodes of the Adam West TV show, the Batman show from 1966. And you know that the villains that they had on that show, they were larger than life, right?
Oh yeah.
So I had this thought in my head. I said, God, a cool villain on this show would be inspired by my favorite artist, Salvador Dali. He's the guy that had the melting clocks in his paintings, for you youngsters who probably aren't familiar with his work. But I thought, wow, what a crazy character he would be. He would be this artist with a palette of magic paint, and he could paint himself out of any situation he got into. So if he robs a bank, he could simply paint a painting on the wall and jump into it and escape, almost like going into a portal or another dimension. Well, as soon as I thought of that guy, I kind of forgot about him as well. And all of a sudden, 30 years later or whatever the heck it was, he popped into my head again when I was looking for new action figures to make. I was like, man, I'm running out of ideas. There's only so many variations of Spider-Man I can make, There's only so many obscure villains I can snag from old 1970s animated cartoons, like the Super Friends or Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends or something.
Mm-hmm.
So I created this action figure of this Salvador Dali-inspired villain, and I named him Surreal Ordeal. Next thing I knew, I was creating other characters that were inspired by my favorite artists to go with him. So then all of a sudden I had this group of 5 supervillain action figures that nobody but I knew about. I'm the only one who had any kind of a kinship with them. I'm looking at these guys these are great. This could be some of my best work, but if I put them out on the internet to show all of my friends, right, and I'm known worldwide for my custom action figures, they're going to look at them and say, okay, Austin, these are great, but who the hell are they? So I had to create backstories for them. And I came up with origin stories for all 5 of them. And I'm like, wow, these are actually pretty cool. I really dig this. I think I outdid myself here. And then I thought, why don't I come up with a comic book story for these villains, and I'll pit them up against Batman and some other DC heroes. And the next thing I knew, I was writing a plot summary that had all kinds of twists and turns and big reveals and stuff. And I'm like, I think I might have something here. So I took it to my friend Art Baltazar, who works for DC Comics as an artist. He is world famous, award-winning guy, one of my best friends. He lives about an hour and a half away from me, and every 3 months, 4 times a year, so we get together for lunch. And I showed him my toys, my action figures. He customizes action figures as well. That's where we first met about 15 or 16 years ago.
Wow.
And he read the plot summary. He looked at the toys. He's like, man, Austin, this is great. This is really good. He's like, I think we could pitch this to the publisher of DC Comics, and he would go for it. And I said, really? He's like, yeah. He's like, C2E2 is coming up in a couple weeks. This was in February of 2020. And he said, you're going to be there. I'm going to be there. I'll introduce you, and I'll set up a meeting. And I'm like, wow, that's fantastic. Well, 2 weeks later, the publisher of DC Comics was let go. DC just absolutely went into shambles. They laid off 250 people. And it was like, okay, what the heck do we do with this story? What can I don't know anybody at Marvel that I can go to and say, hey, we can flip it and make it a Spider-Man story. There was nobody at DC that we knew anymore. My buddy Art, he didn't know who he was supposed to report to, let alone who he was supposed to tell me to go talk to.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So I just came up with the idea that, I am going to take this story. I'm going to finish writing it out in full, script form. I was going to replace all of the DC characters that I was using, like Batman and Green Arrow and Hawkman, replace them all with Golden Age public domain superheroes that had some kind of a following to them. Because if I'm going to write a story and self-publish this thing, which is what I ended up doing, right? Mm-hmm. If I'm going to do this, I don't necessarily want to have all of my own original characters. I'd like to have some kind of a, characters that have some kind of a following out there. And if you know anything about public domain superhero characters, they all have some kind of following. There are people who kind of shun DC and Marvel and the mainstream, big two, and all they do is go for the public domain thing, the Kickstarter guys, et cetera, et cetera. And I thought, okay, this is going to be the perfect mashup. So I took these Golden Age public domain superheroes, I have them fighting against my original bad guys, and then I just started doing some research, like, what is Kickstarter? How do I get artists interested in drawing my comic book, et cetera, et cetera? And I determined from talking to a lot of people that the best thing to do is to go after your favorite name artists and get them to draw covers for you, and then find less expensive but still equally talented, artistically talented artists to do the interior pages. Mm-hmm. So that's what I did. And I just started emailing and calling artists that I had met and known over the years from going to cons, people that I knew in the business through, like my friend's Art, who's in the business. And I just set on a course to line people up. The next thing I knew, everybody that I talked to was like, wow, this sounds like a great idea. This is like my favorite artist of all time. You turned him into this really cool villain. Can I draw his chapter? And I'm like, wait a second, you want to draw interior pages? You want to draw sequential art? Everybody told me that guys like you were good for a cover, and that's about it. And everybody I talked to was like, man, I want to do pages. I want to do sequential art again. These guys were big in my youth, which was the 70s and 80s, and they're not doing that kind of stuff anymore. Mm-hmm. And they really miss it, and they want to do it. So next thing I knew, I was gathering, it was like I would get one artist, and he'd say, call up this guy. And that guy would say, hey, I'm in, call up this guy. Here's this guy's email. Here's this guy's phone number. Next thing I knew, I had artists for the entire 5-issue series, because it ended up, after I scripted it out, it was like 144 pages long. So it was either going to be a graphic novel or it was going to be 5 separate issues.
Mm-hmm.
And I went the route of let's do 5 separate issues. We'll do a couple variant covers on each one. I mean, I had more artists wanting to work with me than I had pages in the book.
Yeah.
You know, I have so many artists that I had to give guys like alternate covers that are only going to be available as 11 by 17 posters.
Uh-huh.
You know, things like that. And you know, if these guys, they're all connected. It's all a network of artists. So if I go to one guy and say, hey, I just got Alan Weiss to do an interior chapter, they're like, oh, Alan's doing it? Oh, I'll do it too. And then you call the next guy and say, well, I got Alan Weiss and Ron Wilson to do it. And they're like, really? You got Alan Weiss and Ron Wilson? Oh, I'm in too. And then it was like dominoes fall.
A snowball
Right.
effect.
Absolute snowball rolling down the hill. You're absolutely right, Sam.
Huh.
And that's where I'm at today.
That's
And
crazy.
it's amazing when I go through my phone. It's like, holy cow! I have this guy's phone number. Are you kidding me? And I have this guy's phone number. And you know that's how I ended up getting a table at C2E2.
Mm-hmm.
One of the artists that's working with me, Alex Savia, who has done as much Spider-Man art as anybody that I know. I mean, he's been working on. He's probably drawn something having to do with Spider-Man for Marvel Comics for over 30 consecutive years. He did
Wow.
the Web of Spider-Man comic book for at least 10 years.
Hmm.
And he, up until Stan Lee's death a couple years ago, he was doing the daily newspaper Spider-Man comic strip that if you still got a newspaper, it was in, you know, the comic section in the back.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that guy, he is just prolific when it comes to Spider-Man. He lives down in Florida. He called me up and said, I don't know if I'm coming to C2E2 or not, but I asked the people at Reed Pop if you could have my table. And I said, no kidding. And that's how I got the table at C2E2. And I was
Wow.
able to coincide the first day of C2E2 with the first day of the relaunch of the Kickstarter, issue 1 for the Masters. And I mean, in the first 2 days, you were there, Sam. I mean, I think I did over 10 grand in the first 2 days.
Yeah, you
Wow.
you funded within like the first day.
Yeah, 30 minutes.
Uh-huh.
Jeez.
Yeah. Yep. And you know, now we've got 8 days left. We're over 20,000. I think it's realistic that we're going to top 25 because we're
Mhm.
bringing in about 500
Yeah.
bucks a day. And you know, the Kickstarter is always heavy at the beginning and it's heavy at the end, and in the middle there's kind of like this valley. So I think we have an outside chance of making 30 grand.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that'd be pretty cool for one issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive.
I think that'd be sick.
Yeah, I'd be pretty happy with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you kind of like, there's a lot of times like we've had on a few people that, you know, are all doing Kickstarters and indie comic book guys and everything, and you know, it's weird. It's interesting, the different hoops, because you went straight to like going crazy. Trying to think of a different phrase, but like balls to the wall, like just
My middle name is Go Big or Go Home.
Ah,
yeah.
your signature must be long.
Oh, it
it's
is.
Yeah, those Scantron days had to be brutal when you were like, Austin, oh man, crap, there's no room.
Oh
Can I get a
my
second
goodness.
Scantron? And
I have been practicing autograph for years. Finally, I get to use
Nice.
yeah, right.
it. Excuse me.
No, like I said, it's going to be the podcast of coughing. Is by the end, we'll all just pass out on our keyboards, and
No. I already
My
took
f-
my nap today. It's okay.
yeah,
I'm well
Cameron will be
rested.
the one that Cameron can come and end the recording later after
Got it.
like 2 hours. So what would you say is like, so like we kind of said, you kind of came from this, like just one day you were like, you know what, I really want to do this, and you started going, you know, kind of just going with it. What was like the biggest hiccup like early on for you to kind of like wrap your head around and start getting done?
I think the biggest hiccup was realizing how much money it was going to cost to produce this.
Mhm.
You know, you don't realize how much money it takes to produce one comic book. You know, you go to a comic book store, and comic books are typically, you know, $5, $6 now. When I was a kid,
Yeah.
first comic book I ever bought off the spinner rack at the drugstore was 25 cents. So when you think about this, what goes into a comic book? Well, a comic book is usually, X amount of pages of content, right? So 16, 18, 20, however many pages you have. Well, how much does each page cost? Well, you've got to pay for the penciler, you got to pay for the inker, you've got to pay for the colorist, and you have to pay for the letterer. Now, that's just what goes into one page. You also have an editor. You also have, think about Marvel or DC or any of the big companies. They have, advertising staff. They've got, public relations. There's so much that goes into it. But just to produce a comic book, if you break it down and say, okay, if I really want to get good quality people, you're going to pay $250 a page for just the pencils. Add $150 for the inking. Mm-hmm. Add another $100 for the coloring and lettering. That's what, $400. That's $500 a page minimum. Yeah. Okay, that's if you want to get named people. Now you take that, you multiply it times 20. 500 times 20 is what?
I said earlier, I'm not good at math.
Yeah,
don't ask me that.
I'll give you a hint. It's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Okay, so where do you come up with this money? You self-fund through Kickstarter or a crowdfunding page. You look for investors. You have to approach comic book stores and say, hey, is this something that you'd be interested in? How do I get hooked up with, getting my product out to you? And then you have to, ask your wife if it's okay if you dip into the savings.
Mm-hmm. No, that is very important.
Yes, it is. It is.
Or, ask for forgiveness, later,
Right. It's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission, Mark.
Like, hey, you're gonna see like a crazy charge on the credit card. Don't worry about it. I'm already disputing it. You don't gotta worry about it. I got it.
This guy's got it down. How long have you been married, buddy?
I'm not, but I spent 10 years in sales, so I just you learn what to do.
Yeah, you do. You do. But that's the biggest thing. If I'm being brutally honest, it's you don't realize how expensive it is, and you think about it. Even if it was half that cost, even if it was $250 a page, mm-hmm. and you want to do a 20-page comic book, you're looking at $5,000 right there. Okay.
Okay.
So, and that doesn't even include printing the thing.
No, it doesn't.
So you have to wonder, what is Marvel and DC? What are they paying their top artists? I mean, they've got guys who come. Alex Ross, he has to command top dollar. Jim Lee, top dollar.
Mm-hmm.
Guys like that. I'm not even at the top tier of guys. I'm at guys who they had their golden moments, and they were paid handsomely when their rate was there, and now it's like, okay, I'm not getting a Jim Lee, I'm not getting a George Perez or any of these other guys who command the top dollar. And Alex Ross, my God, he'd probably be 10 times expensive.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But again, if you think about it, if you were able to get a guy like Alex Ross or Jim Lee, you probably would be bringing in a bigger audience and might be able to offset the cost of their work by getting more people to say, yeah, man, I love that Alex Ross alternate cover. I'm willing to pony up another $50 or something.
Right. Okay. Can I ask, so you said you got all of these crazy artists that you really like to do some pages, covers, things like that. What was the experience while they were doing that? Working with them, was it mind-blowing?
What was the experience while I was working with them?
Yeah, working with them, getting the pages back. Was it just mind blowing?
It is mind blowing because I'm still doing that. Excuse me. We have a 5-issue series, like I said earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Each issue is already about 50% done. Okay. Some issues are 80% done. And getting the stuff in, I mean, it's amazing. I would be out. I remember vividly, I was in Cincinnati with my buddy, and we were driving around town, and I received an email from Mike Grell. Mike Grell is, if you're not familiar with him, you need to look up his work. He is a legend. He's a living legend. the stuff he did, including the Legion of Superheroes, including Warlord and Green Arrow Longbow Hunters, is amazing. And I was able to get him to do just a cover for me. And we're driving around town, and all of a sudden I get this email notification, and it's from Mike. And I look at my buddy, who's even a bigger fan of Mike Grell than I am, and I go, Scott, I just got the cover from Mike Grell. You know, I'm lucky I didn't, mess my pants. All right. It's that kind of joy that you get.
Mm-hmm.
These guys, for me, it doesn't get any better than getting an email from Mike Grell or Ron Wilson or Arvell Jones with pages and covers, even doodles. Joe Staten is an amazing artist, legend. He draws Dick Tracy. He created E-Man. And just out of the blue, he's sending me sketches. And I'm looking at his sketches like, that's considered a sketch? Joe, really? That's a sketch? That's finished art. I don't need anything more than that. It's utterly amazing. The connection with these guys and gals. It's just unbelievable. You totally fanboy the thing,
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure.
Yeah, totally fanboy.
Huh.
No, I've definitely been there, like with people that I've been able to talk to, or was talking to Dan Jurgens, who's the creator, like I'm sure you know, is the creator of Booster Gold, about trying to come on, and still some back and forth on that. But Booster Gold's like one of my all-time favorites. So even getting like responses from that guy, it was the same thing. I was like, I literally called my dad up, and he read comics a lot growing up, and I was like, you're not gonna believe who just emailed me back about coming on the show, like one of my all-time favorite artists of all time.
Yeah.
So you've kind of, you're getting ready for the Kickstarter, which is going to be the first issue. You said there's 5 planned total. If all 5, knock on wood, go according to plan, is there plans for a continuation, or do you have like another potential project that now that you've seen all the success you've been able to do? Do you have like an idea where you're like, okay, I had this other idea, maybe it's time to kind of see what comes of that?
Well, I've got all kinds of ideas. I've got inventions in my head. I want to own a bed and breakfast someday. All kinds of things that I have on my to-do list. But the comic book thing, that is going to be, knock on wood, is going to be an ongoing thing. All of the artists, one of the things that we did was, when I originally proposed my story to these artists, they wanted to recreate or reimagine these public domain heroes I told you about earlier.
Yeah.
They didn't want to leave them as they were drawn back in the 1940s. They wanted to modernize them. So I gave them all the creative freedom to take the individual hero that was fighting the bad guy in that particular chapter they were writing and recreate them. Give them a new costume, give them a new identity, whatever they want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Well, every artist that committed to doing that also told me that they would like to commit to drawing that individual superhero in their own title. So we have 6, reimagined superheroes. We very well could move on from here to 6 individual superhero titles.
Mm-hmm.
Not to mention, I have been fielding numerous scripts from people who are looking for, a publishing company, looking to be hooked up with artists. So I've got a whole, list of emails that I've put aside that I'm not going to tackle until this Kickstarter is over. But I've had people submit everything from horror to adult humor to religious stories and everything in between. So I believe that this can go in other directions, and we could probably have enough to be running 2, 3, 4 Kickstarters at one time with 2, 3, 4 different topics.
Okay.
Or if we're able to do it right and bring in enough money, maybe we can actually get, distributed to comic book stores. That would be a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you know what? That's pie in the sky. I get it. Baby steps. I tried, I'm go big or go home, but we kind of have to do this systematically.
You don't want to get too ahead of yourself.
I don't want to get too ahead of myself. No.
Uh-huh. Well, I had a question about the heroes. So you said they're all like public domain, so they're just like free. How
That's
did you
right.
decide which heroes you wanted in there? Like, did you do it to like match the villains, or did you just be like, these are my favorite, they're going here?
A little bit of both, Sam. What happened is that back in the 70s, and you guys are a little bit younger than me, so you might remember the animated show from a few years ago, Batman the Brave and the Bold.
Oh yeah, love that show.
Okay, love that show, right? Well, when I was a kid in the 70s, I grew up with the Brave and the Bold comic book. And it was one of my all-time favorite comic books. And Marvel had its own counterpart to that. It was called Marvel Team Up. In Brave and the Bold, as in the animated show, Batman would always team up with another superhero, right?
Yeah.
It would be Batman and Aquaman, or Batman and Green Arrow, and so on and so forth. And they would fight one villain. And typically, on their initial encounter with that villain, they would lose. And then they would come back, figure out what went wrong, and they'd come back at the end and defeat the bad guy. Yeah. And that's how the story went. Well, that's how I developed my script. I had Batman as the main hero, and in each chapter against the 5 main villains, he would team up with Green Arrow, Hawkman, Red Tornado, the Atom, and Elongated Man. And the reason why I picked those heroes is because their powers fit well against the 5 villains. And the way I wrote this story was in initial encounters against the bad guy, Batman and, the guest hero, their powers wouldn't work really well against the initial villain they met up with. But at the end, they would swap partners and be able to take care of the villains. Batman would figure out what strength of his hero guest star would work well against the particular villain, and he would make sure they matched up at the end, and good would prevail over evil, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
So from the powers, everything was power-based. I've had people say, well, why don't you have any female heroes in it? I said, well, because Wonder Woman doesn't stretch like Elongated Man, or Black Canary doesn't fly like Hawkman, and so on and so forth. So what I did was I made a list of all the heroes that I originally had in the story. I called up a buddy of mine who lives up in Toronto. His name is Darren Wiltshire. Now, Darren, he owns Temporal Comics. So for everybody out there, go look up Temporal Comics on Facebook, look it up on Kickstarter, and support Darren. I call him the guru of public domain characters. And I called him up and I said, and I've known Darren for years, and I called him up and I said, hey, he's another one of my Mego friends. I called him up and said, hey, I need replacements for Batman and Hawkman and Green Arrow. I need them in the public domain. And he's like, okay. So he did a bunch of research, called me back up and said, hey, man, I've got these guys I think would be perfect for what you're looking for. We discussed it. We said, okay, this is what we're going to do. And we replaced all of the DC heroes with the specific superheroes he found in the public domain. I mean, there were some guys that had long histories, like the Black Owl, who was our replacement for Batman. This rich socialite guy during the day. He fought crime at night, very similar to Batman. He had a long run. He was on a lot of covers. I mean, he had a good, 3, 4, 5 year run back in the 40s. And he has been reintroduced every so often by new publishing companies. So he has a pretty good track record and a good following. But then there were guys like Plymo the Rubber Man, who is our replacement for Elongated Man, because we needed a stretchy guy. Okay.
Right.
Well, Plymo the Rubber Man only appeared in one comic book back in like 1941 or 42. And it was one of those comic books that I call a serial comic book or an anthology comic book, where it would have, it would just be called whatever, Prize Comics or CMO Comics or whatever it was. And there would be like 12 different stories about 12 different things. Like they'd have some superheroes in it. They'd have some comedy. They'd have some war stuff in it. So you had Plymo, who this was the only comic he was ever in. I think it was CMO Comics back in 1941 or 42. And the thing was that it was 8 pages long, maybe 10 at the most. He was this circus performer, and he saved his girlfriend, the trapeze artist, from this dastardly ringleader. Okay?
Oh.
And then he was never seen from again or heard from. And it was a great opportunity to take this character that had really no history and completely reinvent him, recreate him, make up the backstory, and it's the creative freedom that you get from that kind of stuff is fantastic. And there are people out there who actually know who he is from just that one appearance.
Mm-hmm.
So for those people out there, and even probably myself included a little bit, what makes these characters public domain? Like what exactly is the rule?
They were never trademarked or copyrighted.
Okay. Got it.
So now I've copyrighted and trademarked my version of the character.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot use my version of the character, but you can use everything about the character that is in the public domain, like the name.
Uh-huh.
I can't trademark the name. I can trademark the logo I created for him.
Okay.
I can copyright the way he looks, but I can't trademark any of the backstory that I took from public domain. Like Black Owl's name is Doug Danville. Anybody else, including you guys, could create your own Black Owl named Doug Danville. Yeah, you could, Sam.
Wow.
Yeah.
Tempting.
But if you take any of the way the character looks, like I'll give you a great example. Batman has the scalloped cape, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That is trademarked by DC. The spit curl on Superman's head.
Uh-huh.
That's trademarked. Yeah, that kind of stuff. So let's say Superman was in the public domain. You probably couldn't use the spit curl, or use the exact logo on his chest. If they created, if they took a public domain character, that's a bad example. I need to clarify that. Like if you look up the Black Owl, I changed his cape, I changed his mask, I put a logo on his shirt. You couldn't use that logo because it's my logo.
Uh-huh.
You could still create somebody and call him Black Owl, but you have to make him somewhat different. Or you could duplicate exactly the way he was drawn back in the 40s.
Okay.
Do you plan, like, in the future to utilize more of these domain characters, or do you?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's great, man. I got to tell you, there are, plenty of public domain websites out there. It just like encyclopedias online of public domain characters. It's unbelievable, and there's nothing cooler to me than taking people's work that they did years and years ago and updating it and utilizing, their vision from, 80 some years ago. And I give, in my books, I give credit to all of the original artists and all of the original authors. I actually give some of them cameo appearances as characters in my story, name some buildings after them and cities after them in my story. So, I want to make sure people understand that what I'm doing is an homage. It's a tribute to these men and women who really laid the foundation for where we are today. It's just amazing when you go back and look at the history of comic books. It's amazing. It's so much more than Superman and Batman. Much more.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like some people forget that there's this, like you said, there's this history behind comics that's not just, the Justice League or, the people that you're seeing on main screen TV or...
right, or the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Right, yeah.
The Marvel Cinematic Universe, as great as it is, there's still so much that, people who only watch the movies think they know, but they really don't know. There's so much history behind these characters. It's just amazing.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's because there's people, like you said, that you never really would even think to, like, oh, this person's an actual hero or this person's a villain. Like,
right.
Where is this coming from? And it's definitely interesting where, like, just how much is out there that you just never realize. Like you said, that one person was in one one issue of something.
A whole
One
comic
issue.
from 40s.
Yeah,
Right.
way back in the 40s, and then nothing ever since. And I mean, I think there was just so much trial and error in the golden age of comics, where there's just this, like you said, there's this treasure trove of people out there just kind of like waiting for like this next generation.
Yeah. And I don't think most of these people were even thinking about trademark and copyright at the time. They were just doing what they loved, and if it made some money and they were able to put food on the table, I think they were pretty happy.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah.
And then you got guys who came along and just revolutionized everything, like Walt Disney or Stan Lee.
Yeah. So what to you, like, so I know you said like it's not just like you're doing this because you have a talent for writing or drawing or something like that. You're doing it because you're passionate about the things that you're doing. What to you is like what did you grow up reading? What are like those main comic book heroes or villains for you that were either inspiration or just like you'll still pick up the issues today kind of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. The I'm a Bronze Age baby. I consider the Masters my love letter to the Bronze Age. First comic book I ever picked up, I was 5 years old. It was 1974. I went to the corner drugstore with 50 cents. I bought a candy bar and I bought a comic book, and it was The Defenders. And it was the cover of The Defenders was illustrated by Gil Kane, legend in comic books, just an amazing artist. And the interiors were drawn by Sal Buscema, who to this day I still consider my favorite Marvel comic artist. I was into the Defenders. I was into the Avengers. I was into the Justice League of America. Spider-Man and Batman are my two favorite superheroes of all time. And I think it's because their rogues gallery are so delicious. I don't know how else to put it. But, both of them, for one, both are mortal. They both can die.
Mm-hmm.
And most of their villains are the same way. When you think about Batman, the Joker, human. Penguin, human. Two-Face, human. Riddler, Catwoman. Mad Hatter, on and on and on. Human. Rarely does Batman have a villain from outer space or, somebody magical or some, like Killer Croc is a rarity. You look at Spider-Man, he's the same way. Kraven the Hunter, Doc Ock, Mysterio, Green Goblin, they're all human.
Yeah.
Rarely does he have the Lizard, and even the Lizard is human, and he transforms.
Mm-hmm.
I got out of comic books, probably early 80s until the late 90s. And what got me back into comic books was I was in a comic book store. I was traveling somewhere on a business trip in my car, and I stopped at a comic book store. I had a little bit of time to kill, and I was in Champaign, Illinois. That's where University of Illinois is. And I found a comic book store on campus. And I walk in, and all of a sudden, just screaming at me, screaming my name, Austin, come and look at me, was this comic book of Daredevil. Marvel had just reintroduced Daredevil.
Mm-hmm.
And they had Kevin Smith writing it, and Joe Quesada and Jimmy Palmiotti penciling and inking it. They were doing the art. And it caught my attention, and I picked up an issue. Next thing I knew, I was hooked. And those guys, I feel, are responsible for me getting back into comic books, for getting back into customizing action figures, and for ending up doing this. And I actually have become fairly friendly with Jimmy Palmiotti. I met him a couple of years ago at a Comic-Con in Cincinnati. And I brought all my comic books that he had drawn from back in the late 90s, and I put them on his table, and I said, hey, I introduced myself to him. I said, you and Joe and Kevin are the reason I got back into comic book collecting, and you even published one of my letters to the editor. And he's like, really? He's like, I used to pick those out. And I said, yeah, here it is. And I opened up the comic book, and I showed it to him. He's like, I remember this letter. He proceeded to talk to me for like 15 or 20 minutes. Meanwhile, the line behind me was just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. His handlers was like, Jimmy, we got to move on. And he's drawing pictures of Daredevil in my comic books for me and autographing everything. And we actually became fairly friendly, and we kept in touch. And I reached out to him when I started doing this, and he's actually joined the team, and he's going to ink 2 pages in the comic book. He doesn't have a lot of time, but there's a couple of guys who are working with me that are friends with him. He's like, I'll ink a page of each of these guys.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So having the guy who got me back into comic books working on this project, it's a dream come true.
That sounds crazy.
Dream come true. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, let's section off. We're going to talk about you personally, some of your hobbies and everything. You said that you started off making like your personalized like action figures and things like that.
Yep.
What other hobbies do you have and things like that you do in your free time?
Well, I that's my big thing, the custom action figures.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also a big music fan. So I have a record collection. I collect records, vinyl records.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly into what I would call garage rock. If you know what garage rock is,
Mm-hmm.
I know what it is when I hear it. I don't know how I can describe it to you.
No, I understand.
Yeah. So it has a lot of punk vibe in it, from everything from like the Clash and the Ramones to the Dead Boys and the Damned, that kind of stuff. But, there's a lot of stuff that the Beatles did and the Stones did that's considered garage rock. The Doors, the Replacements, stuff like that, to Green Day. But that's the big thing. I'm big into music. I'm big into toys. I'm big into comic books. I love movies and TV. My wife and I were big fans of the binge watch on Netflix. That's always a good thing. We just finished watching Ted Lasso, the first 2 seasons,
Mm-hmm.
which
I still gotta watch that.
Oh, it's such a wonderful show. We watched the first couple episodes and we were kind of like, I don't know about this. And we kind of shelved it for maybe a year. And we just kept hearing so many of our friends saying, you know what, you have to watch the show. And we turned it back on, and man, we couldn't get through that thing fast enough. It was fantastic. So I'm always looking for shows where I can like root for somebody,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's too many shows, and I don't know when this happened, but there's too many shows where there's nobody that's really likable. Who am I rooting for here? We started to watch that show Succession.
Uh-huh.
Okay, yeah.
And everybody was like, oh, this is such a great show. We got done with like 2 or 3 episodes, and we were like, okay, who are we rooting for in this thing?
Like, why do I care right now?
Why do I care? We started Yellowstone about a month ago with Kevin Costner.
Mm-hmm.
And we felt the same way. We got 2 or 3 episodes into it, and it's like, okay, and this is what we do. It's like, who are we rooting for here?
Mm-hmm.
There was
Right.
nobody to root for in that show, and all I've heard is wonderful things about it. But everybody in that show is like, there's something bad about them. They're bullies or they're just bad people. I don't want to watch that. I got enough of that crap in my own life. I just have to turn on the news.
Yeah.
Right,
Oh,
right.
yeah.
But Ted Lasso, you were rooting for everybody in Ted Lasso.
Oh.
Right. See, for me, that's I was really happy when they rebooted Lost in Space, like
Yeah.
the old movie, and so that
Yeah.
show that's on Netflix now, the
Yeah.
last season just came out. It's so good. Like, I love that stuff.
I'm going to have to put that down. There's a show that I've always wanted to watch, Firefly.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Never watched it. I've heard nothing but great things about it. The reboot of Battlestar Galactica is another one with Edward
Yeah,
James
yeah.
Olmos. Never watched that. That's on the list. But I think it had to happen with like The Sopranos,
Ooh, okay.
where it was like, and it starts out where you're like, you find people to root for. Breaking Bad, I consider the greatest drama of all time. It might be the greatest television show of all time. And at first you're cheering for Walter White. At first you're like, oh yeah, man, I'm rooting for this guy. He's got cancer. He's trying to take care of his family. But by the end, they were all bad.
Yeah.
They all broke bad.
Mm-hmm. Literally.
Literally.
Sons of Anarchy is kind of like a similar show like that to me. Like I love Sons of Anarchy, but it's the same kind of way where you try to like root for the guys even though they're doing bad things, but then
Oh,
you see a few of the key guys like slowly start to like cross that line. You're like, oh man, like now what do I
yeah.
do? Like
Now it has what to do with this.
We watched the first couple seasons of Sons of Anarchy, and it got to the point where it's like, why are we rooting for the bad guys? They're all bad.
they're killing so many people.
Right. Right. I mean, I lost interest in Walking Dead after Negan showed up. And, all of a sudden he is like beating people with that baseball bat. I'm like, okay, I can't take this anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm getting old and maybe I'm sensitive because I'm a father. I don't know.
Yeah, I feel the same way though with Walking Dead, where it was like you're watching it because it's a cool like drama about zombie apocalypse, but then eventually there comes a line where you're like, all right, not that many people would probably still be willing to just brutally murder what little people are still alive. Like,
Right.
there'd be some sort of faith in humanity going on.
Yeah, I agree with you. I just can't believe that we would be that tribal.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Yeah, like stuff would go medieval, but not to that extent. Like.
I'm going to go medieval on it.
Yeah, like
My new phrase when I get mad. I'm just gonna go medieval.
I'm just gonna go
real quick.
medieval because that leads to there's a lot of things there that can be medieval about it.
That's foreshadowing.
Right.
But yeah,
Right.
foreshadowing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So also, I'm just kind of curious, as I know based on previous timelines, we're gonna get ready to wrap up in a little bit, but for other people that are maybe kind of in the starting phases of maybe doing something in creating their own comic, or maybe they've always wanted to do something like that, but they really didn't know where to start or what to do. What advice would you give for people out there as a way to get started in something like this?
Just get started. Just do it. I have notebooks and notebooks and notebooks, and you can ask my wife. I would sit on the couch and I have scripts that I've written for future stories, writing the masters. I'd sit on the couch and I would just, anything that came to me, just fill it out. Or if you're a drawer, if you're an artist, draw. Don't stop. And then find people who you want to emulate. Find people that you respect. Find people that you like. Oh, I like the work of this guy. I like the work of this gal. And approach them. Send out, signals to them. Find them on Facebook. Find them on Twitter. These people are just regular people just like us. They have families, they live in houses, they pay rent, they have mortgages, they need to eat. They watch the same shows as we do. All of the people that I've been working with, we get on the phone and we'll talk business for, 5 or 10 minutes, but then we find ourselves talking about fun things for 20 minutes, for an hour.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
There's some guys that I've talked to on the phone for 2.5 hours. And, most of the time it's not anything about getting the comic book done that we're working on. It's about all kinds of other things. How's the family doing? Oh, my kid's in college. Oh, yes, so is mine. Well, I got grandkids in college and, whatever. You need to do it. Just do it. Just like Nike said, right? Just do it. If you're a writer, grab a notebook and always be writing. My buddy Art Baltazar, whenever we are out, wherever we are together, doesn't matter. Driving to a Comic-Con up in Milwaukee, going out to lunch at a Hooters, he's got a book with him where he is drawing. I mean, all the time. That's what he does. He draws. It's kind of like, Paul McCartney or insert your favorite rock star. He's always got like some kind of notepad and he's writing down ideas for a song. Whether it's the music, whether it's the lyrics, whatever it is, that's what you have to do. And then you have to chart a course. You have to have a plan. You come up with your plan, you implement your plan, you measure the results, and then you adjust that plan and make it even better. That's how you do it.
I like that.
Yeah.
Sam, what are some questions that you got here as we get ready to wrap up? I know you said you had written some stuff down.
My next main thing is So with the Kickstarter and everything, you get the comics, your stretch goals, things like that. After this ends, because this ends the 13th, is the last
Yes.
day.
Yes.
How can somebody come and get the comics after the Kickstarter ends?
After the Kickstarter is over,
Mm-hmm.
we're going to set up a website where you can actually come and order additional copies or whatever you need to. So it will flow into the next website. The next issue, and again, this is just what our plan is. There's 4 more issues after this one. The plan is to have 4 more Kickstarters. Depending on how this goes or the next one goes, that might change. We might decide, okay, we're going to do all of these issues on one Kickstarter because it's been so successful, we can get them all out.
Uh-huh.
Or we're not 100% sure of that. We're going to play it by ear. But once this one is done, we're going to migrate everything over to another website where people can actually go and pre-order, or whenever the comic is ready, if they miss the Kickstarter. I've already had people message me and say, oh, you know what, money is tight, I'm not going to be able to do it. It's like, don't worry about it. We're funded, everything's a go. We're going to get this thing done.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
You'll be able to buy it in the future.
Okay. That's always my biggest thing is when we talk to people on here, I was like, great, Kickstarter now? What about later? How can I get my hands on it?
Yeah. No, we're going to make it available to everybody. And, for those of you who just want a synopsis of the story, it is just a traditional Bronze Age good guys versus bad guys story. The bad guys are gathered together. All of their powers come from, are inspired by the art world. We've got guys who have magic paint, magic cameras, all kinds of cool gadgets and stuff like that. And essentially they're hired by this one guy, this leader of the group. He hires them to commit the greatest art heist in the history of North America. And the good guys are set to stop them. And that's it. It's just a traditional good guys versus bad guys story. There's a big reveal, the reveal of the leader of the Masters, that should catch everybody off guard, I hope. Then there's a big double cross at the end. And, we've got some of the greatest artists of their era, drawing this book.
Yeah.
So it's if you dig 1970s, 1980s type of comic books, you're going to love this.
Okay, I'm very excited to read it because, I backed it back at C2E2 because you were handing out covers for people that backed $25 or more on the C2E2 thing, and so here's mine, lovely. And
yeah, that's a great one.
Said this was a redraw of one of the Justice League covers.
Correct.
Yeah.
One of the cool things I've been able to do is get original artists on some of my favorite comic book covers to recreate them, but with my characters. Mm-hmm. So the cover you have in your hand is the alternate cover for issue 1. It was penciled by Bart Sears, inked by Mark Pennington, and colored by Mort Todd. Now, Bart Sears did the original version of that cover on Justice League Europe back in the late 80s, early 90s. And, it was cool that I was able to get a hold of him. And he's like, yeah, I can recreate that cover with your characters. It was just a wonderful thing. And we've probably done that with, I think, maybe 6 to 8 different covers. Contacting people. They did the original cover in 1978, and they're able to redo it with our characters. That's a really cool thing.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed it.
They're creating homages to their own work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like you said, it's a lot of those guys just are happy to kind of recreate what they did 20, 30, years ago. You know
what, Mark? Everybody, and this isn't just the comic book industry, this is the movie industry, this is anything that does with the arts, the food industry, whatever. They're always looking for the next big thing, the next big thing that's going to make them a ton of money. Actors and artists and people in the art community, they still have value and worth. Mm-hmm. I think these artists that are working with me, they have never been better at their craft. They've had years to sharpen their skills, hone their craft. And also right now, they are at the point in their lives where they don't have a ton of work to do. Like back in the 70s and 80s, they were, drawing 10 covers a month. They had all these crazy deadlines. Now they can be much more focused. They can pay much more attention to detail. And I will take anything they're doing today over what they were doing 30, 40 years ago. They are to me at the pinnacle, at the height of their skill level right now.
Right.
Yeah, I think like you said, it's there's just so much passion, I think, with some of this stuff. And like again, Sam obviously had more of a chance, but like just when I was looking through the artwork and everything, like I was just blown away by how good everything looked. And it really does, like you said, it brings you back to, I mean, I got into comics pretty late, but I generally prefer the older stuff. You know, I mean, there's some newer stuff that I still read, obviously, but I generally will like a lot of the older stuff. Like I think Sam knows, she like messaged me one day and was like, "Hey, I'm at this comic book shop and they have the Booster Gold run like from the 80s."
They had literally the entire Booster Gold run except for like number 6 or something like that. So I was like, okay, we're gonna get this one and we're gonna get this one and we're gonna get this one.
So I was
and
like,
had a stack of comics waiting for Mark.
I was like,
Nice.
get them all, please. Like, and I like literally have them all, and I just love it. And I love like those old like 70s to like mid 80s is a lot of the stuff that I'm a huge fan of.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the Bronze Age. I was born in 1969, and I graduated high school in 1986. So those are the years that pretty much bookend the Bronze Age of comics, 69 to 86. I mean, I'm right there in the middle of the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
So you know, my whole youth was spent in the Bronze Age, or what's considered the Bronze Age,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, how can I not love it?
Right. And you had this like like book on your table at C2E2 with all the work in there, and like you
Oh yeah.
can tell him I flipped through every single page in there because I just enjoyed all the artwork that was in that little like packet.
Yeah, thanks.
It's
Yeah,
great.
it's amazing stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So where can not only people find the Kickstarter, but information on like work you're doing, or if I know you said you had a lot of people coming on there. So is there a good, I mean, obviously you go over to the Kickstarter, but is there any other central websites or social medias that anyone would need to be aware about?
Yeah, we're at Power Comics Inc. on Facebook, Power Comics Inc. on Instagram. My name, Austin Huff, on Twitter, and we'll be coming up with our own website really soon as well. But the social medias have been pretty much where I've been focusing my attention for the last year. Building up. We've got about almost 10,000 likes and follows on Facebook. We have over 2,000 follows on Instagram. So that's pretty much where I've been focusing my attention. And then with Kickstarter, Kickstarter is like a social media page all unto itself.
Mm-hmm.
You really need to treat it like it's social media as opposed to just, fundraising or crowdfunding, however you want to call it. It really is its own social media.
Yeah, I agree. And I think if I'm reading this right, it's just so it's Kickstarter, obviously .com /project/the Masters, and then you can go into, and obviously it connects you to other things, the Masters.
Sure. If you just went to Kickstarter.com and search for the Masters, it would come up. It's under a projects we love, so obviously Kickstarter loves us, which isn't a bad thing. And yeah. And you know what? We've blown our goal of 2,500. We're at 20 grand right now, 20,000 and some change.
Yeah,
353. I've got it pulled up.
just a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So every $1,000 increment here on out, we're going to give away. We're going to raffle off 5 autographed covers like you have, those posters.
Mm-hmm.
So we raffled off 5 this morning because we crossed 20 grand.
Mm-hmm.
When we hit 21, I'll raffle off 5 more, and so on and so forth until we run out of them.
Okay.
But I think there's an outside chance we could get up to 30 grand in the next week.
Yeah, and that'd be really exciting.
Man, it would be fantastic.
Yeah, I'm hoping.
Fingers crossed.
All right. Any other last things you'd like the people to know?
No, not really. Not that I can think. I mean, there's a ton of stuff, but I don't think we have enough time.
No, you said 60 minutes and we're like 59.
We're like
so-
right at the mark of what you said you needed to be done by.
And cut.
So we'll have to do a part 2 after the Kickstarter.
Oh, would love
And
to. I really appreciate
we'll-
you guys for
yeah.
having me on.
No,
We'll bring it out
thank
again, that
you
way
for
we can-
talking to me at C2E2.
Oh, are you kidding? You were an absolute pleasure. Absolutely divine.
Gee, Mark.
That's one.
maybe you
That's
should
one for
listen.
30. That's 1 for 30, Sam. We're getting there. See, that's progress.
Progress.
I know. Sam knows I was supposed to go to C2E2, and then like had everything all set up, and then a buddy of mine reached out and he was like, "Hey, I finally got my wedding rescheduled. Are you still good to be the best man?" I was like, "Yeah. When did you reschedule it for?" "Oh yeah, December 12th." Yeah, I'm there, man. Yeah,
I'm there for you, buddy.
Not gonna miss it. All right, I'm there.
Didn't go to
So-
C2E2.
You only get married once. Well,
Yeah. So
maybe.
well,
Oh,
maybe.
there's
A
a
dog.
puppy.
Oh, there's a dog.
Whoa, wait, no, I've got 8 million questions about the dog. What kind of dog is that?
That is a pit bull.
What's the pit bull's name?
He went right for that chair.
The pit bull's name is Ro, as in Ro Laren from Star Trek.
Puppy.
Very nice.
Yeah.
So to cause controversy and to add a topic for next time we have you come on soon, Star Trek or Star Wars?
Star Wars.
Star Wars,
Thank
okay.
you.
DC or Marvel?
I probably would lean DC, but it's only by a hair. You have to understand, I'm a DC and Marvel guy.
Mhm.
Oh yeah.
The only action figures I make are either in DC or Marvel. Now, the company that I model my toys after, Mego, they had every license you could imagine back in the day. Planet of the Apes, Star Trek, Dukes of Hazzard, Love Boat. I mean, they had all kinds of crazy, Starsky and Hutch. But DC and Marvel are the only ones that I focus on. I'm a DC and Marvel guy, but I'd say DC just by a hair, and that might be just because I'm such a big Batman fan.
Got it.
You know,
Yeah.
Batman is 1A, Spider-Man is 1B, and again, like I said earlier, it's because of their rogues galleries.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Are you gonna see the new Batman movie?
Oh, of course.
I'm very excited for that because
Me too.
it's finally a take at like early Batman, which really hasn't been done. Oh, at least not in a cinematic way, anyway.
Did you guys see the new Spider-Man movie?
Oh,
Yes.
absolutely.
Yeah.
What did you think?
Loved it.
Amazing.
Is it the best Spider-Man movie ever? It's not.
Yeah, I don't know about best Spider-Man. I mean, it's one of my more favorite Marvel movies. But I had friends that were like, "Oh, it's the best Marvel movie I've ever seen." I'm like, "There's no way it's better than
Not
Endgame."
really.
Like I was like,
No.
"I'm sorry,
It's
Endgame
no-
is
it's-
still."
I don't think it's even the best Spider-Man movie. I think Spider-Man 2 with Doc Ock,
Uh-huh.
and I think Far From Home with Mysterio. I think those were two better
Yeah.
Spider-Man movies.
That one was
I-
very good.
That was a
I
good
think I think this one was great. You can't confuse quality with nostalgia.
one. Right.
This played on your heartstrings, right? I mean, when Tobey Maguire came through that portal, I was like
Oh,
almost
yeah.
in tears.
Crazy. It was crazy.
Yeah. I mean, he's my Peter Parker.
Uh-huh.
Right, yeah. It was like a weird moment of seeing like 3 different generations of what you grew up watching in superheroes all appear on the same screen at the same time.
Right.
Tell Cameron I said hi.
Everyone says hi, bud.
And-
Yeah? I know.
Oh, Cameron.
I know. If this is
This
your
guy's-
first
this
time,
guy's the show stealer. I can't compete with this.
he
No,
really is.
he is
He's
really like the mascot.
He's the official mascot of the show. I started this podcast, or I guess now it's become like a brand because of him. Because I grew up, obviously, like I'm a huge nerd, but my parents are the exact opposite. You know, my dad read a little comics, watched a little wrestling, but like I discovered this is mostly everything I'm a fan of. I discovered on my own or got lucky, you know, with getting nerdier friends growing up. And so a lot, I know growing up, I didn't know, you know, where to find all this information on stuff because my parents weren't able to help me. And so when he, like, you know, now he's 4, but when this podcast started, he was just over 2. and he's starting to like recognize superheroes and comic books, and like I've started his own collection, and he'll play like Sega Genesis with me and stuff, and I can answer all his questions because his dad is a huge nerd.
A huge nerd.
Yeah, and so he's the reason that this started, because I was like, I think there's a path here to help the next generation, find the information that I could never find growing up.
Well, you get my vote for Father of the Year. How about that?
Well,
Good job,
okay, I
Mark.
appreciate it. One thing right. All right, there we go.
Yeah.
But Austin, like I said, I think Sam would agree as well. We'd love to have you on again when the Kickstarter's done.
Sure.
Just talk about like, and we can do that one live. Just talk about like what happened. That the Kickstarter's done. What's the plans for? Like Sam asked, like what's the plans for buying it down the road, and stuff like that. And we always say this to all the guests we have come on, well, the ones we like anyway.
So
That if it, even if it's like 6 months down the road, if randomly you're starting something new, whether it's maybe the Kickstarter number 2 or number 3 or whatever it might be, and you remember that you were on our show, just send us a quick note like with the link, and if we can get you on again, we will. But if it's something where it's just like really quick, we'll at least put out a tweet or a Facebook post, or we'll mention it on the next podcast, like something, just to help bring a little recognition to it. So.
That sounds great, guys. I appreciate you both. And likewise, if anything I can do to help you guys, let me know.
appreciate
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I will definitely keep in contact, and I think you definitely, like you said, you definitely have some wisdom. I think you can pass on to people.
Tell that to my kids.
Get him in here.
As a fellow dad, it's not gonna work.
Yeah, and you know this already, even with a 4-year-old. And I've got
Oh yeah,
this
no,
7-year-old.
I'm the furthest thing from cool from him. The only time I was remotely cool was when he was watching Power Ranger, and I was like, yeah, Dad met the green and the green and white Power Ranger, and he was like, wait, really? And I was like, yeah. And then that was it. Like that was my one moment of coolness, and then it wore off.
I think you're cool, Mark.
Thanks, Sam.
I think you're cool too, Mark.
Well, this is just the best.
Oh my goodness.
Hey, we didn't even cough that much.
No, not really.
here we
I
go.
had my fits where I had to mute.
Yeah, I know.
But yeah, no overall, not that much.
Yeah.
But like anything that was mentioned that Austin mentioned, everybody, as always, will of course be in the description and everything like that. And because obviously Kickstarters are a time thing, me and Sam will be doing our best to put out as much information as we can over the next 8 days, and even after, because I think to at least a certain extent, you can still donate after Kickstarter is ended. I think to
I believe
certain,
so.
There's like I can't remember how long it is. It might just be a couple of days, but I know you can still donate after a Kickstarter's been done. So of course, even after, we'll try to post another thing or two just to make sure that you guys get a chance to it. But like you said, make sure you go to the Kickstarter, search for The Masters, and back it as soon as you can. I will be backing it as well later today, just because, I mean, the artwork alone, I'm a huge, Sam knows this, I mainly now go for artwork. And I mean, story too is important to me, but I love just collecting just good artwork. And
I can't read, so artwork's more important to me.
We'll get there. We'll get there.
I can't read. I can't do math. I just like to look at pictures.
You know
we're trying our best.
I'm just here to look pretty, and I've already done a good job on that.
Mission accomplished.
I mean, we're debating on who's prettier. We have a debate on that. But
There is no debate in my eyes.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's
That's what I said
Cameron.
to Mark.
it's
Ah.
Cameron does
You know
win.
what? You're
yeah,
not wrong. It is Cameron.
Cameron wins.
that's
Cameron's the
true.
best.
Cameron does win.
I am pretty wise, aren't I?
You are. I'd like to.
it was good. I'll take third. I just won't acknowledge that it's out of 3.
I'll take fourth, honestly. I don't.
Great. Now you mark. You're only 3 out of 4, so it's not that
So
bad.
yeah, look there. We've already reached improvement, and like Sam, you're at 1 person out of 30. That's liked you. So we went from 0 to I don't know what percentage that is.
Me neither.
I'm not gonna figure that out. But to wrap up quickly here, everyone, just make sure if you did make it this far in the episode, whatever you're listening to, whether it's Apple, Spotify, whatever it might be. Make sure you subscribe and leave a review as well. Spotify does now also do reviews, so it's just always super cool. And just let us know what you think. There's a lot of different ways to contact us, but Facebook and Twitter are probably the best, both at Fandom Effect. And if you do want to support the show in a couple different ways, but right now, best ways is going to be to head to our Patreon at Fandom Effect and our Teespring, where you can buy cool little merch and shirts and mugs and all of that really fun stuff. And hopefully you guys are enjoying our new Wednesday releases and get ready for lots of changes. As we said, there's just going to be a lot of fun things going on. We got a lot of things in the works. It's going to be a very busy year. It's going to be hectic. Yeah, it's going to be a hectic year. But it's going to be good. And just make sure you stay tuned to every new episode, every bright and early Wednesday morning of the Fandom Effect podcast. And if you somehow don't get tired of my voice, you can also hear me on Dad's Anime Stash, live every Sunday, where we talk literally just anime, and lots of fun stuff. I'm probably going to be way too busy soon. I figured 6 podcasts is good, right? I shoot for 6. Yeah, yeah, 6 will be working.
Good even number.
Yeah. Like, why stop at 2 or 3? You know,
No.
like, let's
That's
get a couple more out there. But that'll do it for this week. Just make sure we'll see you guys every Wednesday, bright and early. Bonus episodes, when we can get the chance to do them, will be on Fridays. And our little fandom experience tip of the week for you guys this time is going to be to try and experience more variety. If you're new to comics, most comic book stores will have kind of a side panel where it's the stuff that's not DC or Marvel. Maybe it's like what would have been Dark Horse. I know Dark Horse isn't really around anymore, but Image Comics is a pretty big independent. I've gotten some of their people over the years, but just to kind of experience more of the side comics with everything. And we'll keep you guys with new and exciting, fun content in this new year. So hopefully everyone had a great new year, and we'll see you guys next week.
Bye.
Thanks for having me.